It's funny that I'm doing these presentations. I'm doing one on imposter syndrome next week at ASMC, which happens before the ASCII event for a bunch of Apple resellers. What's funny about doing the imposter syndrome topic is that the week after I'm doing a new topic about fear and overcoming growth at IT Nation, and I feel like an imposter doing that presentation. My life is very secular.
Secular or cyclical?
Circular.
Okay.
Sickle. I want to use a sickle, hammer and sickle right to the throat.
Wow.
I bought ducks. I bought custom Virtua ducks, which I'll be giving out at all the conferences that I'm going to. But Michelle asked me why I have a box of so many ducks on the table. And I go, look at all the ducks I give.
So I have this one.
No, it's a
little pirate duck.
Yeah. I put the Virtual Computers logo on there, and the company wrote back and said, you have more room. Do you want us to put your phone number on there? And I said, yeah, sure. So they just did it. So I have 150 or 200 Virtual Computers ducks upstairs. What's funny is I now have boxes throughout the house. I usually am very clean about boxes, but I have a box with hoodies because I have a hoodie to trade with my friend Steph Hilfer, friend of the podcast, at ASMC. In one room, I have the ducks in another, and my contact lenses just showed up, so those are on the island. So I have 3 separate rooms. I'm just trailing boxes. Oh, and yesterday I got a big box because I got the Unify UPS, which I installed in my rack yesterday. So I had those, and that's a box inside of a box inside of a box for safety procedures and
right,
with the foam and everything. So those boxes were just trailing down my basement stairs.
Well, we've kind of been the same way because we just upgraded phones. And of course, with the upgrade of the phones comes new case, new screen protectors, new camera protectors, new cables because, all the chargers like in the car are still USB-A and it has to go to USB-C instead of Lightning now, at least for those of us who are upgrading all the way from 13 to 17.
That's a big jump.
It is. But you know what? Funny enough, I don't know that I've noticed a huge difference so far.
Yeah, you won't. The only thing you'll notice is that the camera's different.
Yeah, I have noticed that.
But the phone itself, same OS. This is my problem with technology. We're not getting into this today. Today, we're going to talk about what happened on Monday, which was the AWS outage. So stay tuned to talk about that. But this is my problem with technology. You can get new stuff all day long. It's the same OS. Windows sucks. Mac sucks. Yeah. We should all just run Linux.
Yeah, we're getting to that point of diminishing returns that you talked about last time.
We did. If you want to hear more about diminishing returns, stay tuned for the rest of this episode.
Level up your email domain security and deliverability. Reduce business email compromise and reel in that pesky email phishing. Make DMARC a new revenue stream for your MSP. Becoming a managed service provider partner with EasyDMARC is a great opportunity for your business to boost sales and decrease risk. Your customers need DMARC. Your job is to let them know that their email domain might be at risk. Find out more today at atmsp.link/EasyDMARC. That's atmsp.link/EasyDMARC. Operating an MSP sucks. Gozinta is here to make it suck less. With their consulting services, they are your trusted advisors through every step of your MSP's journey, from startup to exit. And their software is crafted with care to ensure that they're solving problems for you and not creating new headaches. Find out more at atmsp.link/Gozinta. That's atmsp.link/Gozinta.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the All Things MSP podcast. I am your host, Justin Esker. With me always is my good friend, Eric Anthony. Now, you'll notice I didn't make a beard reference because I am also semi-growing a beard. Mine says creative neglect. His says unemployment filter.
Not this week.
Yes! You weren't the one who got fired from Amazon. This Amazon thing, this is what we're going to talk about today. This Amazon thing, forget all the problems, and we'll get into what happened and how you as an MSP can probably mitigate some of this. But the memes, like there was a picture of Ryan Gosling like leaning on a bench smoking a cigarette, and the caption was, "That AWS developer who went to lunch and was never heard from again." Like just so much after what happened on Monday.
Yeah.
So for those who are not in the know, or listening to this on another date. This past week, which was Monday, October 20th, Amazon had a major DNS failure. The DynamoDB DNS management system deleted some IP addresses and the world shut down. Now, some of my funniest stuff about this outside of the meme thing was CNN had a headline that was like, Amazon down, Fortnite not working. And I'm like, there's way more important stuff than Fortnite not working. As the father of a kid who plays nothing but Fortnite, I'm like, there's so much more that's not working than Fortnite. And this is what CNN decided to put on the headline. It was lingering problems, started Monday. They got it fixed Tuesday. And then the problem still lingered all the way through until Wednesday. We use Avanan as our email protection tool. And Wednesday morning, I got a bunch of emails that definitely were supposed to be from like earlier in the week. So you and I were talking before the show started. I bought the new Unify UPS for my rack on Monday. On Tuesday, I got a shipping notification that it was being shipped and I'd have it on Thursday. On Wednesday, I got an email that says, thank you for your order.
So intermittent problems, the key here. Honestly, I didn't have any essential services that were down. I think the biggest thing that I noticed was that my Amazon Fire Stick wasn't working properly.
I think Avanan was the big one for us. I think most of the other things that we use on a regular basis are PSA, Outage, things like that, don't backbone to Amazon enough, or we're in a different region, because I believe this was only happening, like it was only like the East Coast servers, something like that, right? So if this is one of those ones where like I always joke around, but I'm like, if you've been impacted by Amazon's DNS server outage, you may be entitled to compensation. Please contact 1-800-ALL-THINGS-MSP and see if you can get a penny from us. Like one of those kind of situations. But there's a lot here to unpack, right? As an MSP.
Yeah. Because this, obviously MSPs had to deal with this from a communication standpoint. And these things happen, right? Vendors go down as much as we don't want to admit it. And as much as it may rarely happen today, it does still happen. We got to be prepared.
Yeah. And I think this is a key element because, excuse me, in our contract, thanks, Brad Gross, there is a clause about vendors going down. Where that matters most is on us to communicate that with our customers. So we have a customer, we have a nonprofit that runs this, I guess you would call it like a project-based form system. It's all very medical, and I don't really know how it works. And it's owned by the University of Vanderbilt. But their whole system is on Amazon. It's on AWS. And they've been having intermittent problems for the last couple of weeks that we've been trying to diagnose. And I knew as soon as this thing happened that I was like, let me just jump the gun on this one. And I texted the guy at my client who runs this project to be like, don't know if you saw the news. Amazon's having problems. Don't call me today. We already know. And he's like, yep, got it. Cool. Thanks. What's funny is because Avanan delayed on emails, 3 days later, I got an email from the IT director at that company who emailed the guy I texted being like, there's Amazon problems. You may not, whatever. So for this, though, it's very important that MSPs don't finger point, because I think being negative about a vendor, whether it's the vendor who's using AWS or AWS themselves, doesn't help you. This is very much a case where you, as the MSP, as the trusted IT person for that client of yours, can step in and say, look, these things happen. This is the world we live in. This is what you pay me for. I'm monitoring the situation, and I will keep you up to date with what's going on. There's nothing I can do personally. I don't work for Amazon. If you keep it light and positive, but you also, I don't want to say coddle, but you want to take care of your customers by saying I'm watching the situation. I'm on top of it. I will report to you as I get more information. It makes your customers feel like you're taking care of them, which is what this is about.
Right. Yeah. It's, and a big part of that is the transparency, right? Is making sure that you are first timely with the information. Just like you said, you texted that person right as soon as you knew it was happening.
Yeah.
And then you are saying, hey, we understand what's going on. This is the status. And this is what we're doing to monitor the situation, because there's nothing we can do to actually improve the situation until AWS fixes their problem.
You think your email's important? Fortnite is down. What's my 10-year-old going to do? Actually, what's funny about this, I just thought about this right now, is this goes back to a lesson I learned many, many moons ago when I first started off. I was subcontracting for somebody, and I was doing 10 hours I was doing like 20 hours a week sitting at a customer basically for this other consultant. And I was just sitting in their office, being their IT person. The other consultant who I was working for, like, never got involved. I never really needed to escalate anything to him. I kind of just took everything in my own hands. And the customer had, and we're talking about, this is 2008, 2009-ish. So think about internet lines. This is like pre-fiber or whatever it is. So this customer had a 1 gig, like, I want to say it was, what did they do when they used to connect a bunch of DSL lines together to make like one fatter internet pipe? I forget what that's called.
Yeah, I mean, with T1 lines, they would call it bonding. I don't remember what they called it with DSL.
It was something like that. And so they had a line, and all of the line went offline. Like the main internet went offline. And my hours for the day were up. I was only supposed to be there for 4 hours a day, and I had other work to do. And so I went to the owner of the company, not the consultant who I was working for, saying, like, look, they're down. There's nothing I can do. You should just send everybody home. I have to leave. And he did not like this. Now, the owner of the company wasn't American. He was French. So there was a little bit of like that involved. But he made me stay. And I did until the internet came back up. And that was all day, no internet. And I had to come back the next day and no internet. And there was nothing I can do because there was literally construction in the street and they cut through a bundle.
Right.
But he made me just stay there. And I never thought about, and I was too young and I was too naive and I didn't know enough to like be like, you know what, I'm going to run to AT&T and buy a bunch of like, MiFi devices or whatever to get some devices online, or like, get your iPhones out or whatever it is. Like, I didn't think about that stuff because it wasn't my customer, it was someone else's customer and he should have been directing me. But two, right, I was too young to like think about that. And options weren't as plentiful as they are now. But that lesson of like being transparent with the customer and sticking by them and updating them as you find, like, I didn't even bother to call the ISP because they were like, we're down, we're working on it. I just called it a day. I didn't follow through with it. That's the lesson I'm trying to get to. Is like, I didn't follow through with it the way you do now. You be transparent with your customer. You say to them, we're monitoring the situation. You keep that open line of communication with your customer because it makes them feel like you care. This customer, when I was like, you don't have internet, peace, I'm gone, was like, you don't give a crap about us. And I was like, you're right.
Well, and back then you didn't.
And then just as a record, I got let go from that customer like a week later.
I'm not surprised. So the other thing here that I think is a key point in keeping the client updated is if it's something that is truly critical, making sure you tell them when the next update's going to be is a very good thing to do, because a lot of times then they won't get anxious and call you just whenever they feel like it to get an update, because you've already told them, I will update you in 30 minutes or an hour or whatever is appropriate for what's going on. Like,
even if there's no update to give.
Right. Even if there's no update to give, making sure that they know that is important, and setting that expectation can solve that, or save them from some anxiety and save you from the interruptions of them just calling every 15 minutes to find out, what's going on.
What's happening? Why is nothing working? I don't know. That's not a good answer.
No, that's not a good answer either, because you are the expert. You should never, you can say, I'll go find out.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say
but saying you don't know and you don't know where to find the answer, that's wrong.
Right. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I'm looking into it is always I'm looking into it. I will find out. I will report back as soon as I know. and then making sure you report back is always a better answer than peace be with you and leaving.
Yeah, I'm in communication with the vendor. That one always works.
Yeah, something like that. So, okay, so we've kind of like run down how you should be communicating with your customer. Now, I think there's some good takeaways from this as well. You as the MSP can offer new services now based on this. And you can say, hey, this thing happened. Here's what we can do to mitigate it next time by offering a slew of varietal services. I mean, it depends on which services for you went down, right? For us, Avanan, as our primary email protection went down, there's not much we can do there other than communication. But if you're an office where you have your own cloud applications running and they're using Amazon DNS, here's a chance to add some DNS resiliency, add round robin DNSing, add, or even offer to control the DNS for your customer. So that way you could always just jump in and change something on the fly and set the TTL to 30 seconds. But, I think there's some good pieces here where you can do a little marketing. How my company survived the major AWS outage of 2025. By the way, the people on there's on Facebook when there's like a natural disaster and you mark yourself safe from things. Yeah. Somebody had posted like safe from the AWS outage.
Of course they did.
Of course they did.
And this goes back to just understanding what kind of resiliency the client needs, right? Mm-hmm. And what you can offer in the form of resiliency. We've talked about email a lot today. There are lots of different types of email systems that you can do to have email security. And there are some that don't rely on DNS. They have their own issues, right? And so I don't want to say one is better than the other, but in this case, it would have helped. Right. But you also being prepared to swap DNS so that it goes directly to their email servers. However, then they lose the mail security. So that's not a great option either. There's a lot of things that have to be weighed here. But like you said, it's an opportunity to have a conversation with the client to determine what their priorities are and build their resiliency based on those priorities.
There's also, if you're taking care of a customer that I said it has those cloud apps and stuff like that, a lot of the time when we build stuff for customers or when you work with some service in the cloud, they're usually single point of failures because like you only have one data location and maybe that company that you're working with may replicate data in that same location. But this is a chance for you to replicate to another location and double stack on that, right? Keep in mind, the AWS outage was an East Coast outage, but if you had DNS running on both East Coast and West Coast, you wouldn't have been affected by this. And I'm sure that a lot of the vendors that we use are hardening their services now to work with that. You know what I find actually really funny? I had to look this up. So you know what Amazon calls their DNS product, right?
No, I actually don't.
So Amazon's DNS product is called Route 53, right? Because DNS runs on port 53. Interstate 53, which runs through Wisconsin up into Canada, is 404 miles long. It's a 404 error. I didn't know that.
That's funny.
It's just a random fact because I looked up Interstate 53 and Google was like, it's 404 miles long. And I was like, get out of town.
So basically DNS not found.
DNS not found, exactly. Which is exactly what happened on Monday. But if you, going back to what we were talking about, like, there's chances here for you to build that resiliency and offer to own it, even if your vendor, you're placing more on the vendor. Yeah, there's costs involved. But again, uptime matters. For us, there's not much we could have done about the email security piece. Yes, we could have probably switched everybody off. But the thing is, actually, Avanon's not a DNS based. It's an API based one. So even at that, it wasn't the email deliverable. It was just the system itself was just queuing everything up and not being able to push it out. but having some sort of backup. That's why like we don't talk about round robin DNS a whole lot anymore, but like it's a great thing, or dynamic DNS. This is why I really like Meraki's, by the way. Meraki offers dynamic DNS host names. So when you set up VPNs on client computers, you use that. So if you have failover, the VPN still works. That's chef's kiss.
Well, and another part of the conversation when you have it with the client about resiliency is kind of the difference between SLA and resilience, right? Because an SLA is going to say, we don't guarantee uptime, but we say if downtime happens, this is your remediation. Like this is what you get in exchange for downtime. And it just depends on how they're okay with downtime versus the criticality of that resiliency and having the ability to continue working or get paid something when something doesn't work.
That's an interesting fact you bring up about the SLA, because you know what I didn't even think about was if you look within your own contract that you have with the customer, you probably have an SLA in there. And remember, your customers don't know the difference between you and Amazon being down. They just think it's
Excellent
you,
point.
right? So if your SLA has something about critical servers being responded to within an hour, you need to be able to respond to your customers in an hour with, it's not me, it's Amazon. I have a client who thinks that they're paying us $50,000, $60,000 a year, when in reality, they're paying us like 20, because in their head, everything that's IT related that they're paying for directly is us, even though they're paying for Jump Cloud and file share in the cloud and phone.com and Zoom and all these things. In the owner's head, those are all IT services, and Virtua is
Right.
IT, so it must all go to Virtua. So the amount of times I've had to explain to them, like, that's not my bill. Like, you have to pay that bill. That's not my bill. But if you extrapolate that out here, if that client had anything down due to the AWS thing, they would think that it's me, that it's Virtua. And if they look at my contract with them, the SLA says critical issues will be dealt with, not resolved, dealt with within 1 hour. If we didn't tell them AWS is down, or they didn't turn on the news, they would probably put the onus on us, and then we would have to start that conversation on. And at that point, we're on the defensive, we're on our back foot, which is not a place you want to be ever. Right? So make sure that your contract with your customers very clearly states what your SLA is, and very clearly states the difference between you and what the vendors you're using, or you have an upstream problem, is very clear cut. This way, in case you do get put on your back foot, you have something to stand on at least.
Yeah, and that's going to be part of your managed service agreement. Depending on how that managed service agreement is put together. And it's very important to set expectations like that as to who is responsible for what when it comes to the client, the MSP, and the vendor.
I do like that when we were writing this, one of my notes says we should highlight that this isn't some obscure app failure, but DNS, which many MSPs treat as quote unquote background plumbing. A truer sentence has never been read.
Yeah. And there are services out there. They're basically managed infrastructure services that will handle this for you. They'll provide you with a much more managed pipe coming into the building to kind of mitigate some of these issues for you, rather than depending on one of the few broadband companies that are out there and just their residential or standard commercial service, which really offers not a whole lot in the way of resiliency.
I'm surprised that Google isn't putting out ads being like, wasn't us. Like the it's so funny because like when Microsoft goes down, I joke around that it's Microsoft 362, right? Because it's been down for so many days. But yet we still just feed the beast on these big services like this. And then I love when I get into fights with people because we're a Google reseller and we're a Google shop, and I get into fights with people being like, Google's not appropriate for business email. You got to use Microsoft. And I'm like, well, Microsoft was down for plenty of time. And this is the same case, right? Like, oh, why are you hosting your own thing? You got AWS. Well, this is why, right? Like, what's old is new again. I remember having this conversation, I want to say even a year ago, where like someone was like, do I really need to buy a new computer? Because nothing I do is on the computer anymore. Everything is in the cloud. And I was like, yeah, we're back to using like dumb terminals from the 70s and 80s. And everything is, centralized. But the centralization isn't in the next room with a butt ton of air conditioning. It's in the middle of, Georgia with
somebody else's computer somewhere.
With Jeff Bezos's computers. I have a t-shirt about that. But we rely so heavily on this. And, it takes one person to unplug. Oh my God. Do you ever see that movie PCU? It's a really obscure, this is going to be a really obscure poll, but you ever see that movie
I
PCU
haven't.
with Jeremy Piven and David Spade? It's this movie about a kid who's like in high school and he's coming to check out this college, and he meets he meets David Spade, who's like a young Republican, and they're all like preppy guys. And then he meets Jeremy Piven, and they're frat of like losers. And at some point he's running away from somebody, and he trips over a power cord in a computer lab, and he kills all the computers in the computer lab while like 50 people were working on their like final theses. And now he's got 50 of these people like chasing him as well. This is what I'm picturing happened on Monday. Like somebody was like, hey guys, what's up? Trips over the power cord, takes out the DNS server, and like books it.
Yeah.
That happens. Like it's like a stupid way to think about it, but like we rely so heavily on like one power plug.
Yeah.
Which is what's happening here. We rely on AWS too much.
Or one DNS.
As the case may be. One DNS server. Well, if you've been affected by DNS, let us know. Facebook.com/group/@allthingsmsp. Check us out in our YouTube glory. See if you can spot the differences in our offices. Things have changed. Have they? You don't know. Maybe they have. But go to youtube.com/@allthingsmsp and watch the entire back catalog and let us know. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. You know what to do. Eric, what's our final word of the day?
Final word of the day is, I think I'm going to title this episode, It's Never DNS, ... Oh, wait.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. I'll send you a graphic of somebody sent me a graphic a long time ago of like DNS explained, but like it was all wrong. It's just like, what was that senator who's like, the internet is made of tubes? It was like one of those things. Anyway, right. That's it. Bye.
Thank you for listening or watching the All Things MSP podcast. If you liked this episode, go ahead and give us a thumbs up, hit that like button, and consider subscribing to catch all our weekly episodes. And from your host extraordinaire, Justin Escar, and myself, Eric Anthony, your humble producer and All Things MSP founder, thank you very much for spending your time with us. If you are not aware, All Things MSP started as a Facebook group and now supports over 6,000 members. We also have a LinkedIn page for those of you who don't do Facebook, and make sure to check out our YouTube channel for even more content. And a big thank you to our premier sponsors, EasyDmark, Helped, GoZinta, MoveBot, and Nodeware. And thank you to the rest of our sponsors. Without sponsors, we could not do what we do for the MSP community. Please consider checking them out. The All Things MSP podcast is a BizPow LLC production. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not reflect the thoughts and opinions of any employer, vendor, sponsor, or random taxi driver in the Metro DC area. Be sure to join us next week for another exciting episode.